Welcome to Young Patriots.
But Beijing is now expanding this partnership into the defense sector as well. Now, this trend is clearly visible in the Sahel region, where Chinese weapons and artillery have been making their way. In the latest, Burkina Faso's armed forces have received a fresh consignment of Chinese-manufactured armored vehicles and artillery pieces.
Burkina Faso has just received a massive shipment of advanced Chinese weapons, armored vehicles, rocket launchers, and heavy artillery now lined up on its soil. A nation once reliant on France and the US has turned east, and the battlefield in the Sahel may never look the same again. But why did this happen now? And what does it mean for Burkina Faso's war and Africa's future? Let's find that out. The quiet streets of Ouagadougou were disrupted in August 2025 by the roar of engines, the grind of metal, and the sudden appearance of something rarely seen in West Africa. Brand new Chinese armored vehicles, artillery systems, and rocket launchers rolling into military bases under heavy guard. It wasn't rumor, speculation, or propaganda. Video footage verified by defense analysts quickly showed endless rows of VN-22B fire support vehicles, PLL-05 self-propelled gun mortars, and SR-5 multiple rocket launchers, all painted in desert and jungle camouflage. Soldiers stood proudly beside them, while engineers prepared the machines for deployment. For Burkina Faso, this was more than a delivery. It was the visible proof of a pivot away from the West and a leap into a new military era. The centerpiece of the shipment was the VN-22B, a six-wheeled armored platform designed to survive direct hits from armor-piercing rounds while unleashing its stabilized 30mm autocannon on fast-moving targets. Its advanced fire control system allows soldiers to lock on with precision, even while in motion, a feature that instantly transforms how Burkinabe forces can respond to ambushes on rough Sahel terrain. Watching these machines roll past must have been a surreal moment for a country that, until recently, relied heavily on pickup trucks and second-hand carriers for frontline operations. But the delivery wasn't just about armored fire support. Lined up beside the VN-22Bs were the PLL-05 120mm gun mortars, hybrid systems mounted on armored chassis that can operate as both mortars and cannons. In practice, this means that commanders can shell insurgent hideouts from a distance, then shift seamlessly to direct fire if militants close in. For soldiers long accustomed to either outdated mortars or exposed artillery crews, the PLL-05 represents a level of battlefield flexibility they have never known. Perhaps the most eye-catching of all were the SR-5 multiple rocket launch systems, each with modular pods capable of launching guided and unguided munitions out to 70 kilometers. These systems give Burkina Faso, for the first time, a credible long-range strike option. Militants who once found safety in remote bases now face the prospect of precision-guided rockets raining down from afar. The psychological impact alone, knowing that insurgent sanctuaries are no longer untouchable, could be as significant as the physical firepower. This delivery was not an isolated gesture. Prior shipments over the past year had already included Norinco CS/VP 14 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, CS/VN9 armored personnel carriers, and Shackman heavy logistics trucks, building the logistical backbone needed to support modern combat operations. But the August 2025 package stands out for its scale, sophistication, and visibility. Unlike earlier deliveries that slipped in with little fanfare, this one was displayed openly, even proudly, signaling to both domestic audiences and foreign observers that Burkina Faso is no longer fighting with scraps. It is rearming with state-of-the-art tools. The timing is equally significant. Western military aid has been shrinking, leaving Ouagadougou increasingly isolated. France has withdrawn, the United States has scaled down its footprint, and international promises of support have repeatedly failed to translate into weapons on the ground. Into that vacuum stepped China, not with rhetoric, but with convoys of steel. This delivery was a statement. Where the West retreats, Beijing advances. Still, one cannot overlook the risks. Modern systems are only as effective as the troops trained to use them. Integrating autocannons, hybrid mortars, and modular rocket systems requires new doctrines, extensive drills, and logistical discipline. If mishandled, these assets could become symbolic trophies rather than practical game changers. Yet judging from the scale and pace of Chinese deliveries, Beijing seems intent not just on supplying weapons, but on embedding training and support into the package, ensuring the systems don't sit idle. For Burkina Faso, the arrival of this arsenal is nothing short of a watershed moment. The army, once written off as under-equipped and overstretched, now holds capabilities that rival or surpass many of its neighbors. Insurgents accustomed to raiding vulnerable convoys may soon face armored columns equipped with rapid-fire autocannons and long-range rockets. The question, however, is whether firepower alone is enough to alter the trajectory of the conflict. And so we must ask, why exactly was Burkina Faso so desperate for such a transformation? And how do these weapons address the realities of its war on the ground? To understand why the August 2025 weapons delivery was so urgent, one must step into the harsh reality Burkina Faso has lived through over the past decade. Since 2015, insurgencies have turned vast swaths of the country into war zones. Villages in the north and east were torched, government outposts overrun, and entire communities forced to abandon their homes. By 2024, nearly 2 million Burkinabe had been displaced, making the nation one of the epicenters of Africa's humanitarian crisis. The army, overstretched and under-equipped, was often powerless to respond. Militants arrived on motorbikes or pickups, striking villages and convoys with speed and vanishing into the bush before security forces could react. Old Kalashnikovs, a few aging armored carriers, and scattered artillery pieces stood no chance against insurgents who adapted their tactics constantly. Every time the state seemed to regain ground, the militants reshaped the battlefield, forcing soldiers into a cycle of reaction rather than initiative. This is why the new systems delivered in August were seen as more than tools. They were lifelines. Each weapon directly addressed a specific weakness that had haunted the army for years. The VN-22B fire support vehicles, for example, gave soldiers the ability to respond instantly to ambushes. Instead of convoys being easy prey on open roads, these armored platforms allow troops to push forward under protection while retaliating with heavy autocannon fire accurate enough to pick off moving targets at speed. In a conflict where most attacks occur in transit, this kind of mobility and survivability can mean the difference between disaster and dominance. The PLL-05 gun mortars answered a different problem: flexibility. In the countryside, insurgents hide in forest patches or mud compounds, making them difficult to dislodge with small arms fire. Traditional mortars could shell such positions, but they left crews exposed and were too slow to adapt when militants closed in. With the PLL-05, commanders can bombard enemy hideouts from a safe distance and then, without switching platforms, engage directly if the battle shifts to close quarters. For the first time, Burkinabe units can dictate the tempo instead of constantly being forced to adjust. Then, there are the SR-5 rocket systems, which may prove the most decisive of all. Insurgents have long exploited the vastness of Burkina Faso's rural terrain, retreating deep into ungoverned spaces where the army had no reach. With rockets capable of striking up to 70 kilometers, those sanctuaries are no longer untouchable. Guided munitions in particular allow the army to launch precision strikes on known camps, training grounds, or supply caches. This changes not only the military calculus, but also the psychological one. Insurgent groups can no longer assume they are safe simply because they operate beyond immediate patrol routes. The urgency of acquiring such systems was also tied to morale. For years, Burkinabe soldiers fought with the sense that they were being sent into impossible battles with inferior tools. That sense of futility eroded cohesion and, at times, discipline. The arrival of advanced weaponry does more than increase firepower. It restores confidence. It tells the rank-and-file soldier that his government is investing in his survival and the possibility of victory. In conflicts like these, where insurgents thrive on demoralization as much as firepower, that psychological shift could prove invaluable. And yet, if weapons answer the immediate tactical challenges, they also raise another question. Why was it China, and not the traditional Western partners, that stepped in to deliver them? France once dominated the security architecture of the Sahel, and the US poured billions into counterinsurgency across Africa. For decades, Burkina Faso's security story was written in Paris. The country was once seen as a loyal outpost of France's military presence in the Sahel, dependent on French advisors, trainers, and firepower to confront insurgent threats. But that dependency came at a cost. Paris often dictated the terms, tying aid and military presence to political loyalty, economic concessions, and an acceptance of France's overarching role in the region. As insurgencies spread and French forces failed to deliver lasting stability, resentment boiled over. By 2022, mass protests filled Ouagadougou's streets, calling for the end of French influence. Eventually, French troops were expelled, and with them went the security guarantees that had once anchored Burkina Faso's defense posture. The United States might have been expected to fill the void, but Washington's approach was more cautious. While it funneled intelligence and occasional support, its involvement in the Sahel was increasingly driven by counterinsurgency priorities rather than the existential needs of the local states themselves. Burkinabe leaders complained that U.S. assistance came with heavy conditions, emphasis on governance reforms, oversight mechanisms, and restrictions on how aid could be used. For a government facing daily insurgent attacks, such delays and caveats felt like a luxury it could not afford. This is where China emerged as an alternative. Unlike the West, Beijing does not attach political strings to its arms deals. It does not demand reforms or tie deliveries to election timetables. Instead, it offers speed, volume, and financial flexibility. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré's government, which has defined itself on sovereignty and independence, that approach was far more appealing. Where the West spoke of democracy and accountability, China simply delivered weapons. But it wasn't just about convenience, it was about symbolism. By turning to Beijing, Ouagadougou made a deliberate statement. Burkina Faso was no longer willing to be a client state of the West. It was asserting its right to choose partners based on interest rather than colonial ties. This symbolic dimension is reinforced by the very visibility of the Chinese convoys. Unlike Western weapons, often supplied quietly and in small quantities, the August 2025 shipment was rolled out openly, photographed and broadcast across the region. It was meant to be seen, not just as an arms transfer, but as a flag planted in the shifting geopolitical sands of the Sahel. The timing also reflects a broader regional trend. Mali and Niger, both grappling with similar insurgencies, have also pivoted away from France, with Mali openly embracing Russian military contractors, and Niger exploring Turkish and Chinese options. The three nations now form a bloc that increasingly defines itself as post-Western. By equipping Burkina Faso with modern systems, Beijing positions itself at the center of this realignment, using arms as the currency of influence. For China, the deal goes far beyond Burkina Faso itself. It is part of a long-term strategy to deepen ties with Africa, not just through trade and infrastructure, but through defense and security. Arms sales open doors to training programs, maintenance contracts, and long-lasting military partnerships. In effect, they bind African armies to Chinese supply chains, ensuring dependency not on Paris or Washington, but on Beijing. Every rocket launcher and armored vehicle delivered is also a relationship forged, one that shifts the balance of influence away from the West. Burkina Faso's decision, then, was not just about survival on the battlefield. It was about sovereignty, about aligning with partners who respect its choices rather than dictate them. Yet, this raises another practical question. How is a country with one of the lowest GDPs per capita in the world paying for such sophisticated systems? The answer lies not in ideology, but in the creative financial and political arrangements that underpin the deal. A story that reveals just how far both sides are willing to go to secure their interests. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Burkina Faso's economy is fragile. With one of the lowest GDPs per capita globally, high unemployment, and vast portions of its population displaced by conflict, the image of convoys of freshly imported Chinese armored vehicles rolling into military bases raises a glaring question. How can a country in such economic distress afford such an arsenal? The answer lies in the way China structures its deals. Unlike Western suppliers, who often demand cash up front and enforce strict repayment schedules, Beijing has mastered the art of flexible defense financing. For Burkina Faso, this likely includes a combination of deferred payments, concessional loans, and perhaps barter-style arrangements linked to future natural resource revenues. This model allows a state under pressure to secure weapons today while spreading the financial burden into the future. Gold is the most likely backbone of these arrangements. Burkina Faso ranks among Africa's top gold producers, and gold revenues already serve as the country's primary source of foreign exchange. Analysts believe Ouagadougou may have pledged a share of future gold exports as collateral for the arms deal. By tying repayment to resources rather than cash transfers, the government ensures it can acquire immediate firepower without emptying its treasury. This model is not new. China has used similar mechanisms in places like Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo, where infrastructure and arms projects were secured against oil and mineral revenues. Another possibility is what economists call concessional arms loans, where repayment schedules are stretched over decades. Interest rates remain low, and penalties are minimal. For Beijing, this is not charity. It is a strategic investment. By making repayment easy in the short term, China ensures Burkina Faso becomes a long-term partner, bound to Chinese supply chains for spare parts, maintenance, and training. Once an army operates Chinese systems, switching to another supplier becomes both costly and impractical. Still, Burkina Faso is not putting all its eggs in Beijing's basket. Traoré's government has also pursued deals with Turkey for drones, Egypt for armored vehicles, and investments in local production of light armored units. This diversification is deliberate. It prevents dependency while also strengthening Ouagadougou's bargaining power. By showing it has options, Burkina Faso can negotiate better financial terms with each partner. The Chinese deal, therefore, is not an isolated transaction, but part of a broader strategy of supplier competition. Critics argue that such arrangements risk mortgaging Burkina Faso's future, locking the country into long-term repayment schemes that may constrain its sovereignty. But supporters counter that survival today takes precedence over abstract concerns tomorrow.
Thank you for standing with us, for standing with the truth, and for standing with President Ibrahim Traoré. In these trying times, your voice is powerful. Don't just watch, be part of the movement. Subscribe to stay updated, share to awaken others, and head to the comment section. Tell us how you feel, what you believe, and what Africa means to you. Together we are louder, together we are stronger. This is Young Patriots TV, and you are the heartbeat of the mission. Thank you.